Good morning everyone, Tater here, welcome to Tater Games. Today we're going to be creating an awesome little app, which I believe is my worst game of this year, to be quite frank. It was a big rush. That's right, Senor Tater is admitting defeat. Let's take a look at the game real quick so you guys know what we're getting into. Do not worry, I did not trick you, this video is entirely kinda like Cut the Rope. Kind of. Sausages are just delightful, so if we take a look at the actual game, you're going to notice that there are some sort of rope-like physics in the form of sausages. I was like, I could copy Cut the Rope completely and make a complete clone, or I can just do my own little take on all the features that it includes, and I decided to go with the latter. So Cut the Rope is pretty basic. You basically just cut a rope, and in this you just cut some sausages. At the same time, you're trying to get whatever's at the end of the rope, or in this case, the sausages, which are the rope, to a specific location. In this case, it's a little barbecue down the bottom. So that pretty much covers the cut the rope part. We'll get that out of there. But oh, what's this? You need to cook the sausages? Awesome. Put it on there for a certain amount of time, and then of course you press on the barbecue and it's going to flip it over into this little cabin here. Of course you have a timer, you have a score, and the idea is to kind of keep the time up by going for much harder to cook sausages, and these are usually at the very top, and it's very hard to cook those 4 sausages at the exact same time. We all know the principle here. You got to get a correct balance between time and of course score, and the only way to do this is by going for those higher grade time things when you're running out of time, or to go for a very bad score. Right, I think I talked enough about the game. If you want to download, you can find the link in the description to the Google Play Store, which is lovely. Of course, this video is brought to you by our awesome patrons, and they are here, and they are awesome, and they are literally, I love them to death. They're a great bunch of guys, and of course, if you want to join them, link for that should be down in the description below. Hopefully I see you there. So get ready to stash that knowledge. Improve mustache puns. So the artwork for this game was actually made in Photoshop as opposed to my usual Hexels 2. Yes, I know, big surprise, Tater's using some other program for once. I actually decided to go with the tablet and pen, which I have lying around, and I barely ever use it, but for this I decided, hey, you know what, I'll attempt some more artwork, and not that I'm any good at it, as you can see from the actual game. I find that sometimes your artwork just works together because they all kind of fit the same theme. If you know how to draw, I don't know, I just played around with it, and it all seemed to fit kind of nicely. You can see kind of how I draw stuff. It's not the best. Not that you want to learn this or anything, but I can't really teach you how to draw if you are wanting to know how to draw. As I usually say to everybody, the best program for people who don't know how to draw is Hexels 2. You can create pixel art very easily, you can create hexagonal art very easily, or what do you call it, isometric art very easily. Great program to download, and of course they have Hexels 3 out now, which I shall have by next week, assuming that I decide to make a game using Hexels. So I got a few stuff in the creative process between actually coming up with the idea and making the idea is nothing for me. I never come up with ideas, I just make assets that I see next to me. For example, that night I was eating sausages. The point being is that I decided to draw a sausage, and then I went from there. I had these sausages and I was like, it would be cool if they were hanging up on a chain. I put a chain on there. I don't know what's coming next. I was like, well, we could cook the sausages, or we could slice the sausages, or we could just do both. So of course we have the sausages on a chain. I'm making these rigid bodies, making these rope physics using hinges. Hinges are so cool. It's the way that I make ropes in Unity using different game objects, of course, is different parts of the hinge. And because we are using this, the only thing we need to do in order to cut the rope is actually disable the hinge. This can of course be done within C#. So if we go into C#, you basically need to disable the component. An incredibly easy process. You should see the line of code appearing right now. If I haven't, then I'm too lazy. This entire game, once again, was a rush. So I thought, hey, you can't just cook sausages. You need to get them off the grill. And I was like, well, maybe we can add a spatula in there to actually flip them off and stuff like that. Ran out of time. What did I do? I just made the barbecue go like this. I do take a lot of shortcuts, but they tend to work out. But that came way later. Right now I just had the barbecue, and of course this is basically the entire cut the rope tutorial. So to create the rope, you just basically make a child component after another child component, and then so on and so forth, depending on how long you want the rope to be. You notice in this I only went with 4, but you're gonna notice something sneaky. There's actually a few chains up there that also share the same properties as the hinges. So the sausages, the hook, the chains are all part of one connected line, and of course when we cut the actual sausages, all we are doing is setting it so that it has no parent, and of course that it has no hinge. Thus we still leave it connected to all the other sausages if we decide to chop it up a little bit further. Things like these are really cool. It's a massive workaround, and Unity does it perfectly. So chuck all your game objects in there, line them up to a point where it kind of forms a rope, and then of course chuck hinges on every single one. Then of course we want to go for the top one, let's say, and then we want to make the bottom one a child component of that one, and and vice versa until you have a massive row that just has child component after child component after child component. Then you want to go through individually, unless of course you want to do this through the script method, which I haven't done because there are only 4 sausages. There's no point in programming a script that makes a rope for 4 sausages. So there are 4 sausages in line. Each of the game objects has a hinge, a component attached to it, also a rigid body by default because hinges need rigid bodies. I set gravity to 1 for each of them, and then of course adjust their mass based on their size. Then of course naturally add a collider to each of them, but make sure you do not enable collisions for the actual hinge joints, which means every time the hinge is actually enabled, it's not going to detect collisions with itself. Basically this means that you're not fighting the actual hinge. The hinge is pinning you in place, but the collisions are kind of, or the colliders, should I say, are kind of pushing you away from that hinge point if your colliders are actually overlapping. In my case they were. So do not enable collisions unless you can afford to have your lines overlap. If you want to hinge it to the object above it, you just adjust the hinge by using the little edit tool. You can drag that little hinge knob right up there. Now you just repeat this process with every single game object, and eventually you have a long rope that dangles and waves. Next up, of course, we want to detach this, so I basically added a script to each of the sausages. Now there are better ways to do this. You could just have one script that affects all the sausages, or you could have all the sausages be affected by the one script. Either way, I'm not too concerned. I'm not a professional developer here. If it works, sweet as. Finally, let's go with something like the barbecue over here. How do we actually get the hinge joint to move like that? Pretty simple. We can use limits on it to limit its actual movement. Then of course we can use a motor on it to create a motor. A motor on a hinge is basically making something pivot around that hinge point. So if you have a motor on a hinge, the object itself is actually going to try and pivot around it depending on how much speed you give it. For this, positive speeds are clockwise and negative speeds are actually anti-clockwise. And the great thing about this is that we can actually limit the movement. Because we have limited movement, the motor will not push it past the actual limited movement, assuming that our torque strength or something like that is actually set to infinity. So the way I did this was to create a collider onto the actual object. Of course I added a hinge onto the object, and of course we added a rigid body 2D onto that object as well. Finally, because we have a collider, we can set it up so that it actually catches the sausages, because I know that this is what we are going to eventually do. Then we can create a separate script for it. We can of course get the touch, or we can go for something even easier, which is another function called void space on mouse down. For this, basically, if the mouse clicks on it, it's going to use the motor. If it clicks on it again, it's going to stop using the motor. It's actually a very simple process, that one. I don't need to explain it too much. Here's a tater tip. If you want to set a boolean to the opposite of what it currently is, it's actually very, very easy. Let's say we have a boolean and we call it mustache. I want to set the boolean to the opposite of what it is. So if mustache is at false, I want to set it to true. If it's at true, I want to set it to false. We can, of course, put an if statement here. We could go, if mustache is equal to true, then set it to false. Else, set it to true. But that takes up 5 lines. We want to save some space with 1 line. Instead, we go mustache is equal to not mustache, basically making it whatever the mustache is not. So it's kind of like a double negative, basically saying mustache is not mustache. It's always very useful for stuff like light switches and buttons and all that type of stuff that you want to have on and then off, or other things. So that's why you can see in my script there's a big exclamation mark right there. That basically does this cool function here. It goes between its limits, basically flipping the sausages off and down into the hole. And now of course we have a point scoring system that happens if the sausages are cooked or if they're not cooked. That's basically it. Plop a bunch of UI in there. I've talked about this before in previous videos. Basically all these Sunday videos go over so many pretty much similar things, and you use the same kind of method to make each and every game. It's very simple. The only difference to this game is that it's kind of a lot weirder than the rest. There's not much else I can teach you from this one. It's very, very simple. We use the tile map system for the ground and the background like we have in previous videos. We've basically used every single system the exact same way. So it's just a way to make a different rendition of the exact same game. It's kind of a lazy video in that case, because I don't want to repeat myself. I've said the same thing 1,000 times on this channel. Anyway, thanks for watching if you made it this far through. I haven't exactly talked to you about anything majorly new for this one, but of course it was just my attempt at drawing sausages. It's my inspiration. I want to get better at drawing sausages. I know these videos are a little bit weird now. I don't know, a mustache came out of nowhere. There's some lights back there. The world seems like a different place. Sausages.